Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
If your heart's not right, nobody cares about your skills. How's your heart? Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. This is a podcast where we're really trying to help you learn the fundamentals of leadership these last few weeks. And I'm excited to be with you today. I'm Randy Gravitt.
I'm Mark Miller.
And we're going to talk about the heart of leadership, really embodying a leader's heart. It is fundamental number 5 as we think. Now let's do a little bit of review here. So we started out by talking about the importance of seeing the future.
See the future.
Right? And then we said we got to engage and develop others. We want to reinvent continuously. And then we spent the last few days talking about valuing results in relationships. And really, I hope you have spent some time listening these last few days, but more importantly, I hope you've spent some time activating and starting to practice some of these fundamentals. I mentioned a few episodes ago, we've had a chance to work with high-level sports teams, and I've noticed how they practice the fundamentals over and over. My wife is actually a former music teacher, and she was always working on the scales with the students. These fundamentals are important in every endeavor we have, and I think as leaders sometimes we just do a drive-by on the fundamentals. I know those, and we don't keep practicing those all the time. So today, this one here, as we landed, I said in the last episode as we concluded value results in a relationship, that this one might be my favorite, or at least it might even be the most important. I don't know, but this idea of embodying a leader's heart. Mark, talk to us about this. I know you used a picture of the iceberg.
Yeah. Let's establish
some dots
a little context, a little backstory. When we began this project about 25 years ago, trying to figure out how to accelerate leadership development, we reached the conclusion that we needed to begin with a common working definition, and we wanted it to be behaviorally based. And it was out of that we came up with these fundamentals. And another thing that came out of that season was we decided that it would be helpful to come up with a picture or a metaphor that would help us share this content and help people understand the significance of it. And so we, as you said, selected the iceberg. And I don't know if you remember that from your grade school days, but they taught us that about 10% of the iceberg was above the waterline and about 90% was below. And that this, we believe, is a perfect picture of leadership. And these first 4 fundamentals are represented above the waterline, and they're critical, and they're essential, and they matter. But there's 90% remaining. That's under the waterline, and that's represented by this 5th fundamental. If the top of the iceberg represents your skills, what's below the waterline represents your heart. If we want to be a leader that people want to follow, we must focus on our heart. Because if your heart's not right, no one cares about your skills. And I think I can prove it. You probably know a leader who has the skills that we've been talking about for the last month or so. Those competencies, those fundamentals. But you would choose not to follow them. Well, have you thought about why you wouldn't want to follow them? If they've got the skills, isn't that all that matters? No, certainly not. My guess is if you know someone who has the skills that you would not follow, it's because you've got questions about their heart. That's why this 5th fundamental is so critical.
I've done so many events in the last year. I've asked people to think of the best leader they've ever known. So you're sitting in an audience and you're 40 years old, and you've got a little track record at that point. Or even if you're a young emerging leader, you might be listening and you're 25 years old. Think of the best leader you've ever known. It might be your Uncle Joe or a coach or a teacher you had, maybe your first boss, maybe your current boss that you have. As you think about that person, what is it that makes them the best leader you've ever known out of all the leaders? I mean, they made the list. What is it? Give yourself a little bullet point beside that. And back to what we're thinking here, it's like, I'm guessing it won't be they were able to lead meetings or build teams or solve problems. I'm sure they could do all those things, but that's not what rose them to the top of your list. It was their leadership character, their leadership heart that did that. And we think fundamental number 5, to embody a leader's heart, is foundational for everything else that you do. It's huge here. We're going to talk about it these next few days. I can't wait to dive in this. So
it's a game changer.
It really is. As we think about that, and we think about the people who have forfeited their leadership in the past. I mean, so many people it seem like they do well for a while, but they just don't seem to hold it together. it usually is the character piece that causes that. It's that heart piece that these things that we're talking about here, these heart habits, we've called them. These things get violated. And what I've noticed is character, I think we think it implodes. It's like, oh, what happened to them? But most of the time, I believe character erodes. It's like we take a little step away from where we should be. We stop being positive. The next thing we know, our whole organization is negative. It started with a leader somewhere who got a little bit off that. Or we're a little bit selfish and we know we shouldn't be, and we start thinking about ourselves, and we don't really add value and help the people around us. And the next thing you know, everybody's really selfish in our organization. It started with a leader who got a little bit off track. It just erodes a little bit over time. And then next thing you know, nobody wants to follow us anymore. And I think that's tragic when that happens.
Yeah. These heart habits matter.
So over the next few days, really, we're going to spend a week talking about this content. I'm excited to unpack what we call 5 heart habits to help you embody a leader's heart. But Mark, as we prepare for that, I know you've got a story of something that happened a few years ago. It actually was a question. I'll ask the question of you now. Somebody asked the question, what's the best advice that you could give me as a leader, or the best advice I think you'd ever received?
That I'd ever received.
Tell that story. That was crazy how that happened.
Okay. So I was approached by my social media team, and they said, hey, would you do a tweet chat? Now, I don't even know what you'd call that today, an X chat. But what I've learned is not many people have heard of a tweet chat. So let me tell you what, because I didn't know what it was. And so I began to ask some questions. They said, it's sort of like having a conversation with the whole world at one time. And I said, that sounds confusing. They said, well, it'll be fine. I said, well, tell me exactly what's going to happen. They said, we'll have a moderator. They'll ask you a question. You'll answer it. It'll go out into the Twitter sphere, and then people can respond to your comment, and you can have a brief conversation with people as they respond. And I said, okay, how long does that last? And they said, oh, only 5 minutes. I said, really? And they said, yeah. And then we ask another question. I said, oh, and you repeat and do that for 5 minutes. And I said, great. I said, how long is this whole event? They said, well, it'll be an hour. I thought, okay, so we'll give it a shot. And so I have to confess, it was crazy at points. The screen was moving so fast because we had an influencer who happens to be a friend of mine jumped on, who at the time had about 400,000 followers. So her 400,000 followers jumped on, and it was crazy. And I'm telling you, I got 55 minutes into it, and I was spent. And I'm thinking, oh, I've got one more question, just one more question. And the question was, what's the best leadership advice you've ever received? And I'm thinking, whoa. Okay, and those of you familiar with Twitter back in the day, I'm not even sure the current standard on X, but they had already challenged me. All my answers had to be 100 characters or less. Like, that's not a lot. So let me ask you, what would you say? What's the best leadership advice you've ever received? Here's what I said. Above all else, guard your heart. For everything you do flows from it. That's pretty good stuff, isn't it? I didn't come up with that. That's ancient wisdom from King Solomon. But I think he had it right. Above all else, guard your heart. And in these next few sessions, we're going to try to help you figure out what that looks like in today's world as a leader. Because you really do want to become a leader that people want to follow.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I hope you have the skills to lead meetings and build teams and solve a problem. But here's what I can tell you. If your heart's not right, nobody gives a rip about your skills. We will dive in our next episode. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.